dear devotees, welcome back once again to our ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham and its very beautiful 12 forests. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, I would like to start off today, once again, by quoting Srila Rupa Goswami's very famous verse from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 1-2, verse 294. I've opened the classes several times with this verse, but it's just so important. Krishnam smaran janam chasya prishtam nija samihitam tat tat katar tashtasho kuryad vasham bhaje shada. He writes, the devotee should always think of Krishna within himself and should choose a very dear devotee who is a servitor of Krishna in Vrindavan. One should constantly engage in topics about that servitor and his loving relationship with Krishna, and one should live in Vrindavan. If one is physically unable to go to Vrindavan, he should mentally live there. Now, in his commentary to this verse, Srila Jiva Goswami reiterates what Rupa Goswami has stated in a very beautiful way. He writes, quote, if one is able, one should reside with one's physical body in the geographical area of Braj, which is the residence of Sri Nanda Maharaj, unquote. Now, of course, it goes without saying that one has to be very serious about Krishna consciousness to actually live in the Dham, to stay in the Dham full time. If one has very strong material desires, it's not recommended to live in the Dham, because such material desires could lead to offenses, which are magnified 1,000 times by being in the Dham. Nevertheless, such devotees are not, how would you say, they're not banned from the Dham. Instead, such devotees are recommended to come to Vrindavan from time to time, or to stay in Vrindavan for shorter periods of time. Now the good news is that even if a devotee has material desires, if he or she has a genuine taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna, the Dham itself will gradually purify such material desires. We have to have a strong taste, a genuine strong taste for hearing and chanting. That will be our saving grace. And Rupa Goswami makes that very clear also in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu in 1-254, the potency of having a strong taste for hearing and chanting about Krishna. He writes, Ruchim udvahatas tatra janasya bhajane hare visha yeshu garishtopi raga prayo vili yate. Quote, for a person who has sincere ruchi means like a taste, in his bhajan of Hari, even the severest of material attachments are almost completely destroyed. So if we go to Vrindavan with that in mind, strong taste, go to Vrindavan to hear and chant, that's we can be protected. So the conclusion is that however we're situated in Krishna consciousness, we should visit the Dham or reside in the Dham, according to our level of Krishna consciousness. Of course, Srila Prabhupada, being the infinitely compassionate person that he is, and having full faith in the Dham and the process of Krishna consciousness, and the potency of the Dham to purify us, he's actually invited anyone and everyone to come and stay in Braj. He's so merciful, and for as long as possible. There's a famous, he has a famous purport in Srimad Bhagavatam 5:13 text number 8, where he writes and makes it very clear. He opens it up for everyone if we're serious. He writes, one must go to the Vrindavan forest and take shelter of Govinda. That will make one happy. The International Society for Krishna Consciousness is therefore constructing a Krishna Balaram temple to invite its members as well as outsiders to come and live peacefully in a spiritual atmosphere. That will help one become elevated to the transcendental world and return home back to Godhead. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And by accepting that invitation and always acting properly in Vrindavan, anyone can get, you could say, the ultimate benefit of living in Vrindavan. And that's so nicely described in a verse I was reading the other day in Vrindavan Mahimamrita by our beloved Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati. It's in the chapter Pratham Shatakam. He writes, quote, where do all people effortlessly attain pure prema for Krishna? Where is Lord Krishna's most amazing form meant for pastimes manifest? In what place is the highest level of great bliss from worshipping Krishna's lotus feet manifest? O brother, I will tell you a secret. Please listen. All this is manifest in Shri Vrindavan Dham. Hare Krishna. So, yes. Yesterday during my research, I came across a very interesting verse about Vrindavan. I was reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. And this particular verse, it describes two pilgrims who are entering that transcendental abode for the very first time. It's Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila 5, text number 12. Kaviraj Goswami, he says, Vanayatra Yavana Deki Deki Govardhana Dvadhasha Vana Deki Shesha Gela Vrindavana. Quote, after reaching Mathura, they, meaning these two pilgrims, started visiting the different forests of Vrindavan and came to Govardhan Hill. They visited all 12 forest vanas and at last came to the town of Vrindavan. And Prabhupada, he has a very beautiful purport, very detailed purport about Vrindavan. In the purport he writes, quote, the 5 forests situated on the eastern side of the river Jamuna are Bhadra, Bilva, Loha, Bandira, and Mahavan. The 7 forests situated on the western side of the Jamuna are Madhu, Tala, Kumuda, Bahula, Kamya, Kadira, and Vrindavana. After visiting these forests, these pilgrims went to a place known as Panchakuroshi Vrindavan. Panchakuroshi Vrindavan. Out of the 12 forests, the Vrindavan forest extends from the town of Vrindavan up to Nandagram and Varshana, a distance of 32 miles, within which the Panchakuroshi Vrindavan town is situated. Now, of course, like many of you, I've read CC many times, but I didn't remember, particularly like hearing about this Panchakuroshi Vrindavan. That's why it's important to read many times Prabhupada's books, so we absorb everything. And after that I was thinking, Prabhupada mentions Panchakuroshi Vrindavan twice in his purport. So I was curious, what is Panchakuroshi Vrindavan? What does it mean, or what is it? So I searched and I searched and I searched, and finally I found a wealth of information on Panchakuroshi Vrindavan, which I would like to share with you. To begin with, Pancha, of course, means 5, and Kuroshi comes from the Sanskrit term Kurosha, which indicates a distance of 3 kilometers or 1.8 miles. So Panchakuroshi would mean 5 times 3 kilometers, and that equals 15 kilometers. So Panchakuroshi Vrindavan literally means the area of Vrindavan that is contained within a 15 kilometer circumference. And that, my dear devotees, is what our acharyas say is the present town of Vrindavan. As many of you know, the Parikrama Marg that we often walk around Vrindavan, that encircles the town of Vrindavan, it's approximately around 15 kilometers long. So that's Panchakuroshi Vrindavan. That's what's meant by Panchakuroshi Vrindavan. The town of Vrindavan that we're all very familiar with. Of course, we all assume the town of Vrindavan that we know very well. We go there, we visit the temples. We sometimes have Harinam through Vrindavan. We shop in Loi Bazaar. So we assume the way it appears to us, and little of, history the last few decades, we assume this town of Vrindavan that we see now manifested 500 years ago. Because we know that when Lord Chaitanya sent the 6 Goswamis to Vrindavan 5 centuries ago, what was Vrindavan? It was a jungle. And only when the Goswamis began to establish temples there did it become a regular place of pilgrimage for people, some of whom settled there then and continue to settle there to this very day. So that's our concept of, Vrindavan town. That's the town of Vrindavan. But you may be surprised to learn that in reality, the original town of Vrindavan, we're going past 500 years ago, was constructed by Vishvakarma, the architect of the demigods, for Krishna and the Brajabasis 5,000 years ago. Panchakuroshi Vrindavan, this is the original Vrindavan. Now this information I actually discovered in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. And therein there's a very fascinating and detailed description of just how the original Panchakuroshi Vrindavan town was constructed. Now before I share that information with you, I wanted to say that I've heard some devotees question the authority of the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. I've heard that on a number of occasions. But that Shastra is definitely authorized. In Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9, Chapter 6, Text number 7, in Prabhupada's purport, where really everything is made so clear by Srila Prabhupada's purports. He writes, quoting from the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, and this is a minor quote here, in this age of Kali, 5 acts are forbidden: the offering of a horse in sacrifice, the offering of a cow in sacrifice, the acceptance of the order of sannyas, the offering of oblations of flesh to the forefathers, and a man's begetting children in his brother's wife. So my point here is that Prabhupada's saying that Mahaprabhu is quoting from Brahma Vaivarta Purana. And Prabhupada's quoting Lord Chaitanya in this regard. So there's no room for doubting the authenticity of Brahma Vaivarta Purana. So I thought that today, rather than speak about a particular forest, as we've been doing for, weeks, a month, a year, rather than speak about a particular forest, I would like to speak about the ancient history of Vrindavan proper, the town of Vrindavan in all its glory. Actually, this glorious original Vrindavan, Panchakuroshi Vrindavan, it still exists today. It's there, but it's unmanifest to our material vision. We see a town, and it's wonderful, but the original Vrindavan, which I'm going to describe to you today, It's also there, but unmanifest to our material vision. Again, we need spiritual vision to see spiritual things. So what does that mean? We need a third eye? What we need to do is awaken our spiritual senses, because we're not this body, we're pure spirit soul. And the spirit soul is a person, and a person has senses and intelligence. So when we awaken our spiritual senses, we can see things in Vrindavan as they are. Oh, for that day. So here is the very interesting history of original Vrindavan town. I'll start off by saying, once upon a time. Of course, in the West, this is how a storyteller begins a fairy tale. But what I'm going to share with you is not a fairy tale. It's Purana. It's the real history of this world, of this universe of creation. Srimad Bhagavatam actually goes into great detail the history of creation. We go back millions of years. And therein, actually, in the Bhagavatam, this term, once upon a time, it's used. I found it. Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 18th chapter, verse 24, it begins, Ekada donur ud yamya vicharan. It begins like that, the verse. So, Ekada, Prabhupada translates as, once upon a time. It's there in black and white. Dhanur, arrows and bow, udyama, taking it firmly. Part of the verse is as follows. It begins, once upon a time, Prabhupada translates, Maharaj Parikshit, while engaged in hunting in the forest with arrows and a bow, and he goes on, but that's my point. Ekada, once upon a time. Or, another example, as Srila Prabhupada writes in Krishna book, chapter 34, he writes, quote, once upon a time, the cowherd men of Vrindavan, headed by Nanda Maharaj, desired to go to Ambikavan, the forest of Ambikavan, to observe the Shivaratri ceremony. So I feel very comfortable today because it's such an amazing pastime, a wondrous pastime actually. So I will begin. So once upon a time, Krishna appeared on this earth. Just some basics here. As we know, in the prison of Kamsa, in the city of Mathura. But that same night, he was quickly taken by Vasudeva across the Jamuna to a particular area called Gokula. And there Krishna lived with Nanda and Yashoda for 3 years and a few months until all of his family and you could say the greater community of cowherd people, they left Gokula for the safety of the nearby Vrindavan forest. Because as we know, Kamsa was sending a demon every day to Gokul. So they decided to move. Now, Brahma Vaivarta Purana describes that this large congregation of devotees, and of course Krishna and Balaram, arrived in the Vrindavan forest in the evening. It took some time to get there with their bullock carts, etc., and all their belongings. And they arrived in a particular part of the Vrindavan forest called Chatikara, where all these Vrajabasis prepared to take rest for the night. And in time, the moon rose in the sky, and there was a cool, fragrant breeze blowing. And it's stated that the rustling of leaves created a soothing sound that quickly put all the Vrajabasis to sleep. If you're campers, you may know the sounds of nature can be very soothing sometimes. The wind, the rustling of leaves. They put the Vrajabasis to sleep. And some of the Vrajabasis, their first day in that part of Vrindavan, in that Vrindavan forest, they slept out in the open. Others slept, I read, in tents. And others just slept, in their bullock carts. But in truth, the acharyas say, the gopas and gopis, they didn't sleep. Rather, in the lap of their eternal mother, the Vrindavan forest, they entered into a deep mystic trance, envied by the greatest of transcendentalists. And what was that trance? Krishna, 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 hey. So then when all was silent, Vishvakarma, the architect of the demigods, he suddenly appeared, along with millions of, how is it described, celestial carpenters, stonemasons, blacksmiths, and craftsmen. They all appeared, all carrying their tools, and dressed in heavenly garments. And they were ornamented with all kinds of, gems and so forth. And they all appeared it's described very beautiful and very youthful. They're very youthful. And then approaching Krishna's tent, Krishna stayed in a tent, Vishvakarma bowed down to Krishna outside the tent. He offered prayers, and then he went about his business of building this original Vrindavan town. And he began by mobilizing this multitude of artisans, and but all the work that was about to go on, it was unseen and unheard by the quote unquote sleeping Brajabasis. And it's described that one celestial chariot after another arrived from Svargaloka in huge numbers, bearing all kinds of building equipment. It's written that understanding the needs of the Brajabasis as well as the desires of Krishna, Vishvakarma set about to build a city spread over 5 kroshas. Panchakuroshi Vrindavan. And he intended it to be a city more opulent than the capital of Indra. So in no time he had, all his helpers, they started working, and they began with homes. And the homes that they constructed were made of stone. I was reading with very charming arches, pillars and domes that were luminous in the dark. This is not a fairy tale. This is absolute truth. We don't need to go to certain movies and read certain books to get some description of an amazing place and amazing people and amazing. It's all there in Sri Vrindavan Dham. So these houses that Vishvakarma and his helpers from Svargaloka made, they were luminous in the dark. And each house had a sunken courtyard surrounded by 4 to 6 rooms, and the doors in those rooms were all made of sandalwood, and the walls were inlaid with precious gems. And the courtyards were equipped with fountains and decorative pots in which very rare and luxurious flowering plants grew. And the homes, the potential homes of these cowherd men and women, were complete, to avoid confusion, with an engraved plaque that Vishvakarma placed on the front entrance, so each family could know, when they woke up, which was their residence. Put a plaque there. And then Vishvakarma, he mentally conceived a palace for Nanda Maharaj and his family, which is described was actually the eternal residence of Lord Krsna, manifesting itself within his mind. The eternal residence of Lord Krsna manifesting itself within his mind. Of course, Nandagram, which was some distance away, where Krishna would move eventually, is Krishna's eternal residence. But while the Lord lived in the Vrindavan forest during this period, before moving to Nandagram later, Vishvakarma built a palace for the Lord in the forest. Now the Acharyas say that, quote, the opulences and sweetness of Nandagram appeared in a different form with Chatikara at its center. Because Nandagram is very opulent, it's very sweet, but it at this particular point, it appeared in a different form. That eternal residence appeared in a different form in the Vrindavan forest at Chatikara. So the palace that Vishvakarma built was, the particular palace was surrounded by a very high wall, which in turn was surrounded by a moat and flower gardens, and that made the moat perfect for water sports, I was reading. The moat was surrounded by flower gardens, so eventually when the Brajabasis woke up and lived there for a while, they would have water sports in that moat. And I was reading that 2 large gem-studded gates stood at the entrance to that palace, which contained 4 separate living accommodations, each one with 12 rooms, each including bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, and so on. And the pillars there were made of the finest marble. And the walls were decorated with ornamental designs made of gems so brilliant that the light reflected off of them, from a single lamp, which would illuminate an entire room at night. The gems were very, very brilliant. And the light that reflected off them from a single lamp, there's a little lamp there, right? And the reflection of those gems would illuminate an entire room at night. So these rooms were complete with varieties of ivory and gold furnishings, said to be found only in the homes of exalted demigods. And what else? I was reading that everywhere hung fine silken tape draperies, curtains, festoons, and flags. And the floors were made of marble so translucent that walking on them felt like walking on water. The floors were made of marble, right? So translucent that when you were walking on them, you felt like you were walking on water. And Shastra says that, quote, the steps to and fro those marble floors looked like waves upon lakes of liquefied pure goodness. This is poetry. This is Braj. The steps to and from those marble floors looked like waves upon lakes of liquefied pure goodness. And Vishvakarma, who it's described, I was reading, it said he had transcendental intelligence, was himself amazed at this wonderful palace that he had created. It's like, wow. And with that transcendental intelligence, he understood that in reality, it was Lord Krishna's potencies who had created that town. And that Vrindavan town, Panchakuroshi Vrindavan, 15 kilometers in circumference, it's described was undeniably the most beautiful of all towns or cities, as it, quote, glowed in the dark like a beautiful sapphire. It was all done, and then you step back. What does it look like to you? It's glowing in the dark like a beautiful sapphire. But that's not the end of the story. Hare Krishna. Because Vishvakarma was not fully satisfied. He wanted to decorate Vrindavan forest as well, knowing that in the future Radha and Krishna and the cowherd boys, Balaram, everybody, would enjoy pastimes in the groves of the Vrindavan forest. So in particular for Radha and Krishna, Vishvakarma began by building a rasa mandapa, a circular dancing arena for the rasa dance in the forest. Then he filled Vrindavan forest itself with 5 specific things: benches, lakes, ghats, pavilions, and pathways. It's written that Vishvakarma then landscaped certain parts of the forest, beautifying them with parks that, quote, put to shame the Nandana gardens of the heavenly planets. Now, if you could hear about those gardens in Indraloka, you were like, whoa. I've read some description, I think it was in Rig Veda, like, phew. But these beautiful parks and gardens that Vishvakarma created in the Vrindavan forest put to shame the Nandana gardens in Svargaloka. And all in all, Vishvakarma created 30 such gardens and parks, of which one stood supreme above all others. This particular garden surrounded a secluded banyan tree. And nearby was a natural lake with a golden staircase leading into its clear blue waters. You want to bathe in the lake, you walk down this golden staircase. And it was surrounded by a grove of champaka trees of 7 different colors. And on the eastern side of the lake, Vishvakarma built a very small, ornate palace for Radhesham, which had entrances facing each of the 8 directions. And a staircase of 7 steps led to each entrance, and each step was made from different types of precious stones. And you could see mirrors and garlands and banners and flags were hung everywhere. And the palace's interior had furniture and decorations which even Vishvakarma admitted far surpassed those which he had created for Brahma. Apparently he did some construction for Brahma too, but what he did there in Vrindavan forest far surpassed what he did for Lord Brahma. So before leaving, after all of this was said and done, Vishvakarma quickly toured his creation. And he was, I was reading, he was instructing workers to make, slight adjustments here and there. And finally he had the entire place, the palace that he had constructed, the homes that he has, and all these items in the Vrindavan forest. He had everything washed with water, mixed with 3 things: sandalwood paste, oud, means aguru oil, and kasturi. And as dawn approached, Vishvakarma toured this Vrindavan town in particular and its surrounding area. And after seeing everything, he was simply amazed that he had been able to create such wonders in so little time. And of course, Vishvakarma was, as we understand it, he was simply an instrument of Yogamaya. Yogamaya, Mother Purnamasi, and her dear helper, Vrindadevi, who make the daily arrangements for Radha and Krishna's pastimes, where they'll meet, what the rasa will be, what birds will be there, what they'll be singing, what animals will come, what devotees will be there, what clothes. So really this is all Yogamaya. And therefore he didn't really take any credit. Actually, Shastra says, one quote I read, quote, "He and his workers, like other demigods, have been drawn into Krishna's earthly pastimes for the purpose of their own purification. he and his workers, like other demigods, had been drawn into Krishna's earthly pastimes for the purpose of their own purification. So then Vishvakarma and all of these celestial beings, they gathered together up in the sky, above where Krishna was sleeping in his tent. And they all offered prayers to the Lord, who, it's written so nicely, quote, responded to their prayers by smiling in his sleep. Krishna's Avigna Swarat. He knows everything because he's present everywhere. So he knew what was going on, even as a small child. He's always God. So all these devatas, with Vishvakarma, and they completed their service of creating this original Vrindavan town, and they're all together, praying from their hearts to little Krishna who's sleeping below. And Krishna responded by smiling in his sleep. And then as the first rays of the rising sun rose on the horizon and roused the birds from sleep, the demigods returned to their heavenly abodes, taking all their leftover materials and their tools of trade with them. There was no sign that they, had been there doing anything. And it's described that this Panchakuroshi Vrindavan was exceedingly beautiful, far surpassing the great city of Dwarka that Vishvakarma would build some years later for Krishna. It was the best of the best, le crème de la crème. Now, when the Brajavasis finally awoke, they were amazed at what they saw. It's described, the only thing they could say was, astonishing, astonishing. It's all so astonishing. So then the cowherd men, they approached Nanda Baba, Nanda Maharaj, and they asked, "O king, how did this happen? Please explain to us where these buildings and this palace come from. And look at the Vrindavan forest. It's so nicely decorated with so many facilities." So Nanda Maharaj, kind of had to think for a minute. Then he remembered the words of Gargamuni, who had told him at Krishna's name-giving ceremony. One thing he told him was that his son would be just like Lord Narayan. So Nanda Maharaj, he told the cowherd men, and I will quote here because he just says it perfectly. He says to the cowherd men, "Omniscient Garga Rishi predicted that my son would bring all opulence to our families and cows. And now we are seeing for ourselves that his words are true. The Supreme Lord, who by the movement of his eyebrows creates and destroys the universes, is pleased with us due to our connection with Krishna. And so he has built these homes for us. Why should we question our good fortune?" It's interesting. Why should we question our good fortune? Rather, let us accept it and serve he who has blessed us. By taking care of Krishna, the Brahmins, and our cows, we can show him, meaning Lord Narayan, our gratitude. So cute. So then the cowherd men and women, they followed Maharaj Nanda through Panchakuroshi Vrindavan, as he assigned them their residences according to those names that had been inscribed in these plaques upon their houses. This is your house. You can stay here. And then it's explained that then at an auspicious time, which was decided by saintly brahmanas, Nanda Maharaj himself entered his new palace along with his family and his servants. And then, of course, it's very nicely mentioned. Then the cows, the bulls, and the calves were led to their respective barns, their residences, which I was reading, opened up into lush green pastures. And seeing their cows, bulls, and calves happy, everyone in Panchakuroshi Vrindavan was perfectly satisfied. Shantushti, they were happy. The acharyas actually say, it's a very beautiful quote, their laughter, joyful voices, and playful moods confirmed that the Brajavasis had truly arrived at home. Their laughter, joyful voices, and playful moods confirmed that the Brajavasis had truly arrived at home. Hare Krishna. And of course, this, as I mentioned, this eternal Vrindavan, this Panchakuroshi Vrindavan, is still existing and will forever exist in what we call, Vrindavan town today. We just can't see it now. But Premanjani Chariti Bhakti Valochinena, when our eyes become covered with the salve of love, or the ointment of love for Krishna, by the mercy of our founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada, strictly and seriously following the instructions he has given us, in particular the constant chanting of the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. We will see more than Loy Bazaar, with all due respect. We'll see Vrindavan town in all its glory, in every detail that I shared with you today. And beyond that circumference of the Parikrama Marg, the 15 kilometers, we'll also see the very simple and rural atmosphere of Braj Mandala. Braj Mandala means the greater area of Vrindavan itself, the forest of Vrindavan, Braj Mandala. We'll see that very simple rural atmosphere, God's playground, where he sports with his friends and his gopis and his parents and his cows. We'll see it with, its 12 forests and unlimited lakes and streams and Govardhan Hill, stretching for as far as the eye can see. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki. So, that's the town. It's mentioned there in Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we were able to describe it by going deeper into our research, Prabhupada's mercy. So let us finish today. We can pray along with Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, who writes again in Vrindavan Mahimamrita, Pratanam Shatakam. He writes how he wants to see this transcendental abode of Vrindavan with transcendental vision. We'll finish with this verse. May Vrindavan, where the astonishing cowherd boys such as Subal, who are Krishna's dear friends, play, with the gopis of glowing Kashora age, such as Lalita, full of attraction for Radha, find pleasure. Where Radha and Krishna, attached to pastimes day and night, experience thirst for love through astonishing pastimes of Cupid, kindly manifest to me. Praying to Vrindavan, where all the astonishing cowherd boys, such as Subal, who are Krishna's very dear friends, play with the gopis who are of a very young age, such as Lalita, who is full of attraction for Radha, find pleasure. Where Radha and Krishna, attached to pastimes both in the day and the night, experience a thirst for love through astonishing pastimes of Cupid. Please, will that Vrindavan kindly manifest to me? So we'll keep that wonderful prayer of Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati in our hearts, and we'll nourish it through our different devotional activities, and hopefully develop a very intense desire to return home, to go back home, back to Godhead, as Prabhupada stated. back to Goloka Vrindavan Dham. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, having once returned, we never come back here again. Thank God, so to speak. Thank Krishna. Thanks, Srila Prabhupada. And thank you to all of you, again, for this opportunity to share these valuable gems that we're finding in the treasure chest of our Bhakti Shastras, Srila Prabhupada's books. Have a wonderful day. We'll be back again in a few days. Thank you. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Dai Go Premanandi, Shri Mayapur Dham ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dham ki, Jai Jai Sri Sri Radhe. Shime, 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 Shri Vrindavan Dham.